G'day everyone, welcome back to True Footy and Just the Tips for round 4. Another solid week of tips for me. I got 6 out of 8. Essendon did me dirty. I did have a funny feeling about that game. I don't know if I said it in the video, so I can't claim it. But I do think that was one most people got wrong. With all due respect to Essendon, I thought Port Adelaide would win that one, and they were quite disappointing. The other game that I got wrong really annoyed me. Brisbane versus Geelong. I tipped the Cats, and at the time, I was the only person in the Bunnings tipping competition in the top 5 to have tipped Geelong, and had they won and had they held on to that 5-goal lead, I would have taken top spot. But alas, Brisbane had to do their thing as the premiership team, whatever, and come back and win, and soiled my tips. But overall, 6 out of 8 is not too bad. Correctly tipped the Derby. Who saw that coming? But today we're going to talk about round 4. We do have some tipping results and fantasy results to go through as well. So congrats to the Mad Hueys, who got 8 out of 8, outstanding, and the correct margin. So tipped Essendon with the correct margin. Well done, the Mad Hueys. Great username, by the way. Tipping leader overall, though, is Sarah Gleeson with 22 correct tips and a margin of 38. Congrats to you, Sarah. That's outstanding. And the fantasy leader this week is Dominic LF. I couldn't fit the whole name in there, Dominic, but well done. With an average of 1882. Guys, if you want to take part in these competitions, you absolutely still can, with the link in the descriptions below. Now, this round is a doozy. There are some really tough calls in here. And I think that does start with Carlton and Collingwood on the Thursday night at the MCG. Great rivalry game. So much narrative into this. Carlton obviously 0-3, having 3 very similar results to start the year. In all of their games, they've jumped out to 4 or 5 goal leads. I think was it 41 points against Richmond? A healthy lead nonetheless. And, very predictably in the second halves have been outdone. I think I heard it was like 67 to 156 in second halves this year for Carlton. So a very clear drop off there as the game wears on. That being said, at their best, they've been okay. They've been, maybe not outstanding, but, they've gotten leads against Hawthorn. That's not easy to do. I think the Bulldogs are a pretty good side, even without Bont and Treloar at the moment. They were playing well and sit 0-3 in the bottom 3 of the ladder, which is just crazy. And the West Coast, well, we may have made a horrible choice choosing Hawthorn's picks instead of Carlton's in terms of the Tom Barras deal. But anyway, I don't want to talk about that. They come up against Collingwood, who we've seen a bit of. They have been smashed by the Giants. They are coming off the bye. But in the other 2 weeks were really good against Port Adelaide, 91-point win. Port Adelaide have been a little bit Jekyll and Hyde so far this year. And a good win over the Dogs, who again, we're still getting a read on, but they seem like a pretty decent side from what I can tell. So Collingwood has shook off that opening week, and Carlton's still kind of caught in his malaise. But having said all that, I think this is such a big spectacle with so much riding on it from Carlton that I am not writing them off for this game at all, and I'm finding it really tricky. I think, to be honest, Collingwood are the better side. But that does, if you always tip the better side, you're never going to get all your tips right anyway. So that's bad logic. I feel like Carlton might actually pull one out of the hat this week. Am I brave enough to tip it? I don't think so. I think Collingwood are looking pretty good, save for their week 1 result. They've had a week to freshen up. I'm not writing off Carlton here, but I'm going to say this is a classic and Collingwood win by 12 points. Hey guys, just a quick note to let you know this video is brought to you in a paid partnership with BetterHelp. One thing I think that is quite foundational to someone's happiness is the quality of their relationships, whether they be romantic relationships or just relationships with the close people in our lives. The thing about relationships is that they can be complicated and they can be quite emotional, and you can find yourself asking yourself tough questions. Some of these questions might be like, why do I feel so anxious every time they don't text back? Or why do I tend to gravitate towards, toxic people? Why do I panic when someone gets too close to me? Relationships are not easy, and trust me, you are not alone. I think often the worst thing you can do if you're in a situation like this is continually ask yourself these tough questions into the void and not getting any clarity on them. So this is where the partner of this video, BetterHelp, comes into the mix, because they can help you match with a therapist that can help answer some of these questions. Rather than being trapped in this endless loop of asking these questions and not getting any clarity, you can talk through these relationship issues with a trained therapist who's trained to listen and help you. If you want to find out more, go to betterhelp.com/truefooty or click the link in the description below. It's as simple as filling out a quick questionnaire to assess your specific needs. And, if you don't find the right therapist at first, you can switch to a different one at no additional cost. So like I said, if you're interested, click the link in the description below or go to betterhelp.com/truefooty. By doing so, you'd also get 10% off your first month with BetterHelp. Thanks guys, let's get back to the video. Geelong versus Melbourne at Cardinia Park, GMHBA, as it's currently called. Historically, this has not been a happy hunting ground for the Melbourne Football Club. They did win in the year they won the premiership. That was a great game, but I think they're so far off that quality right now. Geelong has also been a bit iffy. So round 1, annihilate Fremantle by 89 points. Round 2, get done by the Saints. Again, we're still getting a read on the Saints, but 4 occasions in a row, St Kilda have beaten the Cats at Marvel, which is crazy. They get 5 goals up against the Brisbane Lions and admittedly lose the game. What do we make out of that? I mean, Brisbane are a great side, and it actually played out a little bit like the prelim last year, the famous prelim. Maybe not as dramatic, but Brisbane overcame them, and not only that, probably could have won by more. As someone who was switching between the two games, it felt like Brisbane were clearly the better side as that game wore on. So Geelong sit 1 and 2, but I still think they're a good side. It's a tricky one. Melbourne, however, have been quite disappointing. 0 wins, 3 losses to start the year, and some of their best prime movers in the midfield playing at the moment. Obviously, it goes to show it's a bit more than just a star-studded midfield. But look, against the Gold Coast Suns, they were well beaten, and that was something I predicted. I really think the Gold Coast Suns might be a good team right now. And absolutely got pantsed. So hard to have any confidence in them going to GMHBA and beating the Cats, who are generally strong there. Not perfect. They have lost a bunch of games there over the last few years rather. But I just cannot imagine the Melbourne Footy Club winning this, with all due respect to them. I'm going to tip a 45-point win to the Cats. Now, this is a doozy. This might be the most unexpected game of the round in the sense of like the start of the year. Gold Coast and Adelaide, 2 sides you thought maybe have potential to move into the 8. Well, I'll speak for myself. I didn't have either of these sides in my 8, whilst acknowledging they had potential. However, they have both been really good to start this year. Now, the Gold Coast Suns have only played 2 games. They've played West Coast, they've played Melbourne. And on the current ladder position, those are the bottom 2 teams. However, what I saw against West Coast, I got the impression it was a very, very good, powerful, dynamic, fast team against a terrible team. Not simply a case of a terrible team getting smacked because they suck. It was both. Then they beat Melbourne heavily at the MCG. Now, remember the Gold Coast Suns couldn't win away last year, and now they've won 2 games on the road. To what extent is Melbourne an easy kill? We're still learning that. I'm prepared to say that they're a pretty easy kill right now. But, you can only beat who's in front of you, and they've won both games convincingly. Now, we've got the Adelaide Crows. They torched St Kilda. St Kilda have been pretty good since. They smashed Essendon, who then won the week after. And I suppose the trend with Adelaide is that they've been weaker teams, but they've also conceded reasonably high scores. That will be interesting to see how that plays into this game. Against North, I thought North challenged them. North are pretty decent at the moment. Again, still getting a read on them. We don't know exactly where they sit in the pecking order. But I would say that both of these teams have not played a team that you expect to play finals in 2025. So we're seeing 2 teams here who are hard to, really rank at the moment, who are playing dynamic, dangerous footy, coming against each other. And both of them have not played an opponent anywhere near as good as them so far in 2025. So I think this is going to be an absolute ripping contest between 2 up-and-coming dark horses in the competition. Now, what will dictate whether or not they're a real dark horse is how long they can sustain this for, naturally. But on current form, this is a hot game. Last year, they met, I want to say it was round 1, and the Gold Coast Suns got out to a big lead. Adelaide hemmed them in and lost by 6 points. That was completely off the memory, so I hope that's right. Both sides, I think, are better versions than what they were, particularly Adelaide, 12 months ago. The home ground advantage here might be the kicker for me. I think I'm going to tip the Gold Coast Suns. I think Adelaide they've demonstrated more in the sense that they've played an extra game. They've won against Essendon. They beat St Kilda, who has played well since, but I just feel these 2 sides might actually be really evenly matched right now, and I'm going to split it by the home ground advantage. So sorry, Adelaide fans, I'm not sleeping on you, I promise. You're a very good side, and I expect you to play finals. But I think right now the Suns are in great form too, and I'm going to tip them by 10 points in a great game. Richmond versus the Brisbane Lions. Now, we've had 3 performances from Richmond, one where they hemmed in Carlton, came back, great game, probably still game of the year so far, and then been pumped twice by a Port Adelaide side that hasn't won otherwise, and been quite poor in their losses, I would say. And then against the Saints, again, St Kilda have had 1 bad game in 3. Their other 2 games, they were pretty shit hot. So, look, they're coming up against the Brisbane Lions. It's very hard to see how they can engineer a win out of this, to be honest with you. I think the reality is young sides are more vulnerable the further you get into the season. And with Richmond, it's clearly been very difficult for them to back up an outstanding round one performance. Now, doesn't mean they can't play well, but the Brisbane Lions are a very good team who are undefeated, and I still feel like have a lot of improvement left. Like, they didn't play a full game against Geelong, certainly didn't play a full game against West Coast, and you know what? I think we're down at halftime against Sydney. So in all 3 games, they've been able to click into gear in the second half because that's what good sides do. Look, not too much analysis here. I don't really rate too much of a chance of an upset here. I don't think the Brisbane Lions are anywhere near top condition right now, but I think if they can beat Geelong, I think they can beat Richmond, even at the MCG. So I will say 42 points, and that's probably being a little bit conservative. Okay, great. We've got another game here that I think is actually tougher to tip than it has been in previous years. North Melbourne and the Sydney Swans at Marvel Stadium. North Melbourne do look much better than in previous years. There's no doubt about that, and able to run with teams a little bit longer. I think early in the season last year, they were slow starting from memory and then clicked into gear, second half of the year, bad finish. Well, we've seen a pretty competitive 3 games from them. I think they were pretty solid against the Crows at Adelaide Oval, where, teams of North Melbourne's ranking, you'd expect to get pumped by a team that is putting teams away right now. I think North held their own really well. I think their midfield game is really strong. I think they play Marvel well. They beat the Demons there. They were competitive with the Bulldogs side, who should be in the mix for finals, you'd think. And so far, so good for the North Melbourne Footy Club, and they've only won 1 out of 3. Sydney, 1 win, 2 losses. They beat Fremantle in Perth. They lost to Hawthorn, and they lost to the Brisbane Lions. So that's a pretty tough fixture, and they are missing some key players. Now, I think they're still going to be missing key players for this game. And I just have a feeling this is going to be a really tough ask for them. And I think this is winnable for North Melbourne. Last time these 2 sides met at Marvel, I believe North Melbourne could have won, but it was that late 50-metre penalty for a interchange infringement. So, that's not a lot to go off. It's just one game where North Melbourne nearly beat Sydney. And I think it was 2023 where Sydney finished 8th. I actually think I might tip North here. I don't think Sydney's going that badly. I think this will be a close game. Similar to how Sydney and Fremantle was a close game, I'm going to tip North. I don't think I decided that before I started this video, and I really talked myself into it. I think this might be a bit of a coming-of-age game for them. Sure, they beat Melbourne, and that was significant. That was a big win, a rare occasion where North Melbourne really were able to punish a team. And I think this game, beating a genuine finals contender or grand finals from last year, I'm going to back North in. I didn't expect to do it, but yeah, the Roos are going to win. Oh boy, is there any point? Oh, I'm sorry. GWS and West Coast at the Sydney Showground. The Giants last week, weird game against Hawthorn. It was a strange game with that breeze. They were up 37-2 at quarter time and got, hemmed in by halftime. I think they were down, weren't they? And Hawthorn proving to be too good. Good game. Hawthorn are a good footy side. Just a weird game to really get a read on the flow of that game because of the breeze, but they were bested by a better team on the night. Other than that, though, they have put in some really strong performances, namely against Collingwood in particular, and then a close win over the D's at the MCG in a game that I think was good. I know Melbourne are struggling, but that game, having watched it, was a good game of footy. So all of that to say, I think GWS are a good side, and West Coast are not. The derby was very error-riddled, let's say. Effort level was there. West Coast has, had issues with sustaining effort for 4 quarters. That wasn't the problem in this game, but the skill level is so far off the mark that, it would require perfection. It would require an effort like West Coast showed against Brisbane, but with better skill execution. And I think that's probably a bridge too far. So no real analysis needed here. GWS should win by 60 points. Port Adelaide and St Kilda at Adelaide Oval is an interesting one because you've got a side in Port Adelaide who were expected to play finals. Well, a few people jumped off that bandwagon. I was not one of them. I believe I had them in 8th. And they've been Jekyll and Hyde, as much as anyone in the competition so far this year. So 91-point loss to Collingwood, a big win over Richmond, and a disappointing loss against Essendon where the standard of that game wasn't great. So home ground advantage against a side in St Kilda, whose recent trip to Adelaide Oval was quite, it didn't end well, let's say. They lost by 10 goals or something in the end. So I think home ground advantage comes into this. However, St Kilda is the better side on current form. This will be big for St Kilda's season. And it will be very significant for Port Adelaide's season if they lose this. But I don't know if I'm there yet. St Kilda just beat up on Richmond last week, which is not undermine St Kilda. They were good the week before and beat Geelong. I think that was the week before. I just mean from last week, I don't think we really learned much from St Kilda other than the fact that they can score quickly. I think they scored 92.5. So, look, if any point over the last few years, if St Kilda was going to win in Adelaide against the Power, it would be here. It'd be now. Port Adelaide looking vulnerable. But I'm going to say that Port Adelaide will do that thing where they play well at home and win by 18 points in perhaps an unconvincing win. But I think it's the travelling to Adelaide part for me where I think St Kilda, I wouldn't back them. If this was at Marvel, I would. And finally, I think Fremantle and the Bulldogs is the final game of the round. And again, a really tough one to tip. Fremantle, I got the sense that in the derby, West Coast started well. They were hunting really well. It was a good even contest. West Coast got an early lead by 5 points. I felt that the more mistakes West Coast made, the more confidence Fremantle grew into, if that is a phrase, and were able to improve over the course of that game. They probably should have won by more. So for a team that started the year, in a less than ideal fashion, big loss to Geelong, and then losing a close game to Sydney, maybe they've gotten some form back, some touch, some confidence. I think that would bode well for them in this game. Now, I think the Western Bulldogs are probably the better side on current form from what we've seen this year. They've had one loss to Collingwood in a pretty good game on a Friday night. I think it was the week before they beat Carlton. I think the Bulldogs are in better form, but for me, again, Fremantle at home is a slightly different customer. They did lose to Sydney, but it's very hard to quantify this right now. Like I said, I think the Bulldogs have been better. I think Fremantle has scope to improve. I predicted them to finish top 4 in my ladder prediction because I do believe there's been a maturity in that list now and it's pretty well rounded. Still missing some key players. The Bulldogs are also missing key players. I think that the Bulldogs played Perth pretty well. I think I'm actually going to tip the Bulldogs. I thought I was going to tip Fremantle here, but I think I'm going to tip the side that has been better so far in 2025. Fremantle would need to improve to win this week. I think the Western Bulldogs would be a decent chance to have beaten Sydney in this hypothetical game, and Fremantle lost to Sydney, so we're still trying to figure out where we're ranking everyone. I think credit's where it's due. I think the Bulldogs have been very good this year and we're pretty close to being 3-0. So let's say 13 points. All right, there you go. Those are my tips for round 4. And and Adelaide and Geelong the following week is going to be an outstanding game. But looking at the ladder, probably a fair reflection of who's been good this year. Hawthorn, Brisbane, Gold Coast and Adelaide still in the top 4 despite me tipping Gold Coast in that game. GWS, Collingwood, the Bulldogs, and Geelong. So yeah, we're starting to get a bit of a feel for the ladder so far. Carlton versus Collingwood would be fascinating if Carlton do start the year 0-4. You'd think Melbourne do start 0-4. It's very hard to imagine them beating Geelong at GMHBA, and I can't imagine any other scenario than West Coast finishing this round in 18th. But a few teams in the sort of middle ground there. Sydney at 1-3. That's probably not a reflection of the footy they've played this year. I think they've had a tough fixture. I suppose this is kind of a big game for them as well. They don't want to start the year 1-3 against North Melbourne. And that one could go either way. I realise I've probably tipped the team less likely to win, but that is the game of tipping, isn't it? So let me know in the comments, guys, what you agree with, disagree with. Game of the round, I think you could pick a few doozies. I'm going to say Gold Coast and Adelaide. The upset of the round, I think, I did tip North. I suppose that counts. But I might say that Carlton beating Collingwood, I don't think is impossible at this stage. I think Carlton could lift. Can they do it for 4 quarters though? Collingwood do run out games fairly well, don't they? So that could be upset of the round, but there's some really good games on offer this weekend and I can't wait to watch it all. So let me know in the comments what you think and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.